introduction. And thank you for my great panelists for being with me on stage today. Hi, everyone. My name is Tommaso Astazi. I'm the head of regulatory affairs at Blockchain for Europe, a trade association based in Brussels. And of course, we're talking today about the MiCA regulation, which you may all have heard about. But today we're trying to explore the regulation, this important piece of regulation for the European Union, a bit more from the industry perspective, at least to try and see what will be the impact of this massive piece of regulation on the blockchain and crypto industry in Europe. And I'm very happy to do that today with my fellow panelists. I will just, maybe you want to all say hi, introduce yourself, say your name, say where you work, so I don't have to make any mistakes with your spelling, and then we can get started with a few questions. Sasha?
Sure, I hope, yeah, it's working, perfect. My name is Tommaso Maksymenko. I work at Revolut as EU Government Affairs Manager, so I'm dealing with EU-wide policies for Revolut. Who doesn't know, Revolut is a global financial super app, and we offer crypto services, buying, selling of crypto, plus withdrawals and deposits.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ernest Lima. I'm a partner of XReg Consulting. We are a public and regulatory affairs consultancy company specializing in crypto assets. We work with both the public and the private sectors. And prior to that, I was a former head of policy at the Gibraltar Financial Services Commission, where I was first introduced to crypto back in 2016. And before that, I was a financial services regulatory lawyer.
Yes, hello, I'm Nena Dokuzov. I'm from the Ministry of Economy in Slovenia, but I'm also a member of European Blockchain Partnership. Apart from this and the European Blockchain Services infrastructure, and I'm involved in some use cases. On the other hand, I'm a member of INADBA government advisory body, and now I'm coordinating a task force for transition to European Digital Infrastructure Consortium, EPSIC, for blockchain, which will be the first real institution for blockchain in Europe, probably from early 2024 on in Europe.
All right, great. Thank you, Nena. You can already hear a few of these initiatives and things that are actually happening in Europe thanks to what has been happening, at least from the legislative point of view, right? So the European Union took this important step, and now there is, of course, a lot of new initiatives coming out of that and concrete use cases and examples. And it's also interesting, I think, in our panel we have a bit of the the fintech, we want to call it, industry perspective. We have, of course, a public perspective, the public institutional perspective, and then, of course, we have Ernest that is a bit in between, this connection between public and private and how companies can navigate this industry. So let's try and understand, first of all, maybe a general comment. Let's hear from Oleksandra from Revolut. What is your overall impression of MiCA, and what do you think will be the impact for the fintech industry in that case?
MiCA is definitely a great development, not only for the industry as crypto as a service providers, stablecoin issuers, other industry players, but also for the Europe as a whole. Because I think Europe right now leads by an example where regulation can actually attract businesses, and that clear regulatory environment is something that is needed for the industry. So this is, it's a great milestone and achievement for Europe and crypto industry in general. When it comes to the impact for traditional players, fintech players, crypto as a service providers, I think the main outcome would be we'll have more collaboration, because right now, without any clear rules, we can see that, okay, some traditional players are a bit skeptical, not even about crypto, but also about blockchain in general. Not a lot of traditional finance service players, they're interacting with crypto exchanges or just generally, they don't offer crypto services. And Revolut is one of the, we're in the minority when we do provide crypto asset services, and also we wouldn't have any issues with crypto deposits, withdrawals, and transferring of money to other crypto exchanges. So this is a good development when it comes to the collaboration. But I would also like to mention that and point that it's not the happy ending yet. There's still a lot of work to be done on the crypto asset service provider side and the fintech industry for traditional players to fully appreciate this new segment that are now an inevitable part of this whole financial ecosystem. One, for instance, clear example of what MiCA is not touching yet, but what it's creating reputational concerns on the traditional finance side as a fraud issue. Unfortunately, as banks, we see lots of scams happening with crypto, and it's not the responsibility of crypto as a service providers to understand it fully. There are plenty of examples, especially in the UK with, for instance, I think it was the case of a Chase Bank recently that they stopped any transactions to from crypto exchanges for their users. And the reason is fraud is happening with crypto. So it's still, there's still a lot of room for improvements and for further collaboration. And I hope that, yeah, MiCA is just one great milestone, but still lots of things to do, and we're happy to be part of this evolution.
Thank you. That's, I think, a positive, reaction to, of course, a very important milestone, as you say. But indeed, there is a few things to clarify and open questions. Ernest, what do you think? You want to share a bit of insight on what these open questions are with our audience? There is a few things that we're still not very clear about, right?
Yeah, sure. I completely agree with everything that Oleksandra has said. I think MiCA is transformational. It is a model to follow. We work with other jurisdictions who are looking at developing their regulatory frameworks, and everyone to date wants us to look at MiCA and what it is that the legislation says, the detail, how it is framed. So first of all, I just wanted to add that it is a big milestone, and as a major economy, the EU will definitely be followed in many ways by other jurisdictions. In terms of the gaps, I think there are some areas such as DeFi, NFTs that clearly fall outside scope of the regulation, and I think it opens it up for interpretation at the moment. There is a risk of regulatory arbitrage across the EU with national regulators looking at how they interpret things like DeFi. Is it really DeFi? What does it mean to be truly decentralized? At XReg, we look at it as more like a hybrid finance, a hi-fi, because inevitably, I think there are DeFi applications that need to interact with centralized actors. So I think it is important for regulators and international standard-setting bodies to try and better understand these type of applications and how they work in practice, how they operate with one another, what are the interconnectedness between one another to understand how you should regulate them, and not jump to try and come up with a framework that is very similar to the traditional centralized players, which doesn't really work in its entirety.
Yep, indeed. I think that's a very good point at the end. And that's also, I think, the risk that we saw with regulation coming from the financial services sector, where obviously policymakers try to apply existing rules and frameworks that they know really well, that have been applying to traditional financial players. And of course, they think that it could be as easy to just transpose those rules to new type of financial services and or other type of technologies. And I think Ernest also mentioned a few of those questions that are still to be answered, and these will hopefully be clarified as part of the level 2 process, so we can also maybe mention a bit of that. But I think I also want to turn around now to Nena, because Nena, you also started mentioning a few things about that are happening on the side of MiCA, right? So it's not just the regulation, but the European Union is also putting some political capital on the development of the blockchain sector, on the development of a blockchain infrastructure across the European Union. So I don't know if you want to share any thoughts on MiCA, but also maybe I think it could be interesting for our audience to know a bit more about these initiatives and projects you're working on.
Yes. but now maybe just to reflect, okay? I have all the time the dilemma either to say maybe the European Commission has done the good job to define the framework for financial digitalization and the realization of that financial digitalization strategy, or they did more problems that, are coming out from this MiCA. Okay, now we have in Europe the situation that the financial sector is trying to regulate certain things, also with MiCA, which is okay, because it gives us some legal clarity, legal certainty, investor protection, equal standard that should be taken into account when licensing, registering, and so on. On the other hand, and we are talking all the time that those regulations are technology agnostic. But on the other hand, we all know that which technology is here behind, and there is another stream, also in the level of the European Commission, that is developing the technological approach, developing the European blockchain services infrastructure, which will be the cross-border, interoperable, and decentralized. So it gives us then the basis, the opportunity, how to think about to incorporating or integrating those also decentralized finance, the governance models into the blockchain technology. So what would be the main topic of that future blockchain institution in Europe? To put all these things together, to take into account the development of blockchain technology as such, so not only the protocols that are existing under EPSI at the moment, but also to scale up with the other blockchain infrastructures. That was also included in the Digital Europe program and foreseen. So we heard even before in the panels, we haven't achieved mass adoption yet. Yeah, but we can achieve mass adoption also with the integration of additional blockchain protocols and blockchain infrastructures. This is the first thing. The second thing is we are developing now for 5 years at least 3 use cases that are very important. So self-sovereign identity, we know it's relevant also for the financial regulatory framework, to ensure traceability, trustness in transactions, and so on. Verifiable credentials for diplomas and social security pass. Now, this time we are pumping up traceability, traceability of diplomas, products, materials, also in connection with the digital product passport. And here, with all of these steps, we will create one homogeneous but decentralized governed institution that will focus also on the research and development, and research and development in the way that we are going to use the solutions from a European blockchain sandbox, the solutions from other use cases that can be also implemented within European blockchain services infrastructure, but also in the way that we embrace new technologies under Web 3, Web 4, and the future development of the technology. I was too long.
No, that was perfect. Thank you, Nena, also for dropping the Web 4 buzzword, which, if you don't know, but that's how the European Commission is already calling the virtual worlds and next generation of augmented reality and the convergence of all of these technologies. We're still talking about Web3. The European Commission is already much ahead of all of us. But I think that was what Nena was mentioning is really interesting, right? So there is, on the regulatory front, Europe has taken a very important step. I think the interest that, of course, there is in this topic shows that this is really something, is a milestone, is something that other jurisdictions are looking at as an example, as something that maybe they can take example from or even do better, right? So that's also considering the global market that we all working in and we're exploring. It's obviously very important to have this global convergence of different regulatory approaches. So obviously that's the first important point. And then on the side of that, there is some very concrete initiatives, use cases being developed, being launched by the European level across the European member states, which I think it could be really interesting for also the industry to look at and take to try and understand and explore how can they be part of this process, how can they really be of help in setting up this new framework. So thanks a lot for that. I think now will be interesting though to also talk a bit about the challenges that we have with the implementation of this regulation. So it's interesting because MiCA, of course, is meant to be implemented, is a regulation. We're not going to do European Studies 101 now, but there is a difference between directives and regulation at European level, but rules are supposed to apply homogeneously across the whole European Union. But is that going to be the case? Is there a risk of some national divergences on approaches, licenses, authorization? Looking at you guys, I don't know, Ernest, you want to go first?
Happy to go first. I think there is a big risk of that happening in terms of divergence across the EU member states. You have to remember that the EU has an AML framework in place. All member states do have regulation from an AML perspective, so you do have a lot of firms that are registered from that point of view. But a lot of jurisdictions have taken very different approaches. Some are being very proactive with how they are looking at the implementation of MiCA. Others are being less so, and it will definitely result in different implementation periods, meaning that by the time that the legislation comes into effect mid next year and at the end of next year, you will have some regulators that will have a regime that's much closer to MiCA, which will facilitate a smoother transition to MiCA. So that's going to be a good selling point for that jurisdiction. Others will be slower to the mark, meaning that they're going to benefit from the whole grandfathering period after everything applies. But some are going to struggle with getting all firms that are currently registered under an AML framework to be fully authorized under MiCA. And you have to remember that the big advantage of being fully authorized is that you will benefit from passport rights across the EU. So if that is a priority for you and you want to get a good share of the market, it's definitely important to consider which jurisdiction you set up now and start looking at what you need to do to get fully MiCA authorized. I think there are a lot of challenges, and we could go on talking about the level 2 standards, everything that's coming out of that, some of the guidelines, the difference between a crypto asset and a financial instrument, a lot of new requirements such as the need to have a business continuity plan, disaster recovery plans. A lot of this is new to the crypto asset firms, and there's a steep learning curve for many of them to comply with the MiCA standards. So I think there are firms that are being very proactive, but others that I see are not doing enough yet to get ready. So we would encourage everyone to try and understand what are the requirements and everything else coming out of level 2, and start acting now.
I would like to add a practical point to this. Thank you. I do agree, but I think the most important thing would be to look at the front runners. So the country that would implement MiCA the fastest, with the most capacities, and I think most of you know what European country that probably is. But it's interesting to see whether the situation would be the same as with investment funds in Luxembourg, because they were fast, they allowed for passporting, they were the first to allow the passporting, and now it's a hub for investment funds. They build the capacities, firms around investment funds started to grow in Luxembourg, and I think that with MiCA, it can also be the case, probably not to that extent, because already there are companies registered in different countries across Europe, but we can already see some champions in this game. Countries that understood, okay, that we can attract funds, we can attract investments, it will be pro-innovation if we build capacities to understand what's coming, how to regulate this business, and how to offer the best conditions for this business. Because it's extremely important when it comes to the implementation, not only understanding the rules and, I don't know, aligning national legislation, but also having teams and the regulators able to supervise, to communicate, and generally teams that are open to new players for the market. So I think in terms of implementation, like let's see how it goes with the countries, because we'll see the first 3 movers, and then I think everything is solved, decided, and the situation is pretty much clear.
Maybe more European answer, okay? Let's try to educate the national competent authorities, the national regulators, to act in the same or the similar way. Before MiCA, we had AML, 27 different countries, 27 different approaches. Now we have the opportunity to unify this approach, to make in all the countries implementation rules in the same way, so that we can push up the Europe as a whole, not only from the champions. And the other thing, we will have, in any case, an issue on the competition, okay? Because the traditional institutions will face the lack of knowledge here, and the CASPs will face the lack of market here. And we probably will have the other issues other than educating the regulators and integrating the knowledge on this level.
Yeah, those seems to be very important consideration to keep in mind. But I also want to reassure our audience, right? And I'm sure there is a lot of people that are also coming from outside of Europe, and so they have heard about this MiCA regulation, they heard about this approach taken by the European Union, but now they're probably scared about all of these rules and requirements and licenses that you will have to go through. Well, I think the message that should come out of these discussions is that MiCA, and as we heard now, it's all about harmonizing rules across the whole European Union, right? So right now we have fragmented rules. After MiCA will come into force, which is more or less happening on the 1st of January 2025, will be the rules applicable to everything, to all crypto asset service providers and so on. At that moment, the rules are meant to be across, the same across the whole European Union, which means you get one license in one country, and this was mentioned a few times, and you're able to passport that license, and you're able to provide services to over 500 million people. So think again about before saying that Europe is not the best place where to establish yourself. But this is also interesting from an international perspective. I mean, we're all happy here. We're all very excited and optimistic. We've been dealing with MiCA maybe a bit too much to still be so optimistic about it. But is this optimism being shared? Is this perspective also being, the same outside? If you have been engaging with, companies outside, jurisdictions, regulators in other places, do they all share this optimism about the European Union regulatory framework?
Again, happy to go first. They do. I think, in short, they do. A lot of companies from many parts of the world are looking very closely at MiCA and looking to set up in an EU state. I think it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of one of the guidelines around reverse solicitation, because that may have a big impact on how third country firms do business with EU customers. How limiting that will be. Will they be following a similar approach to the UK? That would be a risk for firms doing a lot of business with EU customers. But having said that, as you said, I think the EU is a major economy. There's a lot of customers. Once you're set up in one place, you can passport freely, solicit business in all other jurisdictions. That is an incredible advantage for a major economy that you don't have anywhere else. There's a lot of uncertainty in other parts of the world. MiCA does bring that legal and regulatory certainty, which is important, which is what these crypto asset businesses are seeking all the time. So I think that, yes, the answer is yes, we will see, we are seeing a lot of firms looking at setting up in the EU, and that will continue to happen over the next year. So there's going to be a lot of activity from a private business perspective, but also from a regulator perspective, doing a lot of education and making sure that they're ready to regulate this sector.
Nena, Sasha, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree, definitely. It is called Brussels effect, you know. When
we love the Brussels effect in Brussels. Yeah.
But it makes some certainty, so it's not bad. We can compare this cross-border impact also with the GDPR. With the GDPR, we received the standard that is now taken into account in all the other economies. Now we have MiCA, and okay, maybe not with the first iteration, but with the second or upgraded iteration, we will get even more firm standards to be implemented also cross-border. And it will facilitate it. It will be enabled also on the common cross-border infrastructure, and it will enable also the European industry to reach out the foreign markets. So I think it's beneficial.
Tasha?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, we're happy about MiCA. And again, one practical thing is that right now we need to have almost several licenses across Europe because some member states require us to have a license to market our crypto as a services actively. And of course, MiCA is helpful because then you passport in one country and then you can offer and market your services across 27 member states. So we're extremely happy when it comes to cross-border effects and laws in other jurisdictions. We hope that other countries will take the European approach, especially it concerns the United States. And I think everyone knows that there are some issues with defining crypto assets in the first place and then not having a clear frameworks in which you can operate. So we're definitely happy. But maybe one point about also Brussels effect, Nena, that you mentioned. We're engaging on the international level in consultations on how to regulate crypto as a services. And we see that a lot of these consultations, they copy almost what Europe has already introduced. So we already see that this is a benchmark almost for crypto regulation, which is a very positive development for us and I think for businesses you work with as well.
All right, thank you. So I think we can conclude here with a few call to actions. First of all, to policymakers, once again, to keep talking, cooperating, educating. We, of course, are here for that. That's what we as an association do, and a lot of other stakeholders are trying to do. Second of all is we need to finalize still this MiCA framework. It's still not yet finalized. There is a few open questions on DeFi, on NFTs, on the guidelines to classify crypto assets as crypto assets. And so still a few open questions that need to be clarified. And then it's really, I think, the call to action is to the wider industry. You should be looking at Europe as an interesting place where to set up shop. It will allow you to access an important market by just taking, again, one license in one member state. And also an invite, I would say, to all of you, to our audience, and to European citizens. We do have European elections coming up in June. So it will be important to actually make sure that we go and vote for people that maybe at least understand what this blockchain technology is all about. So we're hoping to see that in the next 5 years, there will be a next European Commission, a new European Parliament. They will set up the new legislative priorities for the European Union. So it is important that we make sure that all the good work done so far in this last 5 years is not lost and is also followed up by more interesting initiatives to really make Europe an important and innovative place for these crypto asset markets. So with that note, I would like to thank my panelists, thanks the audience. I hope it was interesting for you. Thanks again to the European Blockchain Convention.